Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 134, Silva vs. Okami, or UFC RIO. It'll take place live on August 27, 2011, from Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. One of UFC's first trip back to Brazil in a number of years. And I will be providing preliminary picks, 3 preliminary picks and 5 main card picks, including our middleweight championship main event. Before getting into the actual predictions, I just want to touch upon my UFC Live Hardy vs. Lytle performance. I went 2-7. It was brutal, but it's bound to happen in the prediction business because this is Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions, not Kamikaze Overdrive MMA truth-telling or fortune, future seeing. It's predictions. I'm bound to have bad nights. Probably my worst night ever. I will recover. Epic fail is the 2 words that come to mind when I look at that show. It was hard to watch, and I appreciate all of those people who didn't come on and jump all over me for my predictions. I got a number of things right, I think. Just it didn't turn out. I talked about Dalloway's takedown and being able to take down Jared Hammond. I talked about how Hardy needed to avoid trying to take down Chris Lytle because Lytle only seems to submit guys if they take him down. That came to fruition. I talked about how much I suck predicting Ben Henderson and Jim Miller fights. So the past is the past. Let's move on, and let's get to my first set of predictions. Alright, so here are my preliminary picks. Again, I'm only doing 3 picks, the 2 that are on Spike and the 1 that will probably be on Facebook. The rest of the fights I didn't feel comfortable enough doing predictions without doing more research. I didn't want to commit that much time. With the Ian Loveland versus Yves Jabouin, originally I was going to do it, but felt with Jabouin making the cut to 135, I didn't have enough information to see how he'd fare in that fight, so I left it alone. Maybe to protect my record a little bit. But either way, let's get into it. The first fight is Paul Thiago versus David Mitchell. Now, Mitchell is predominantly a submission fighter. He has 9 of his 11 wins coming via submission. And Paul Thiago, he's a BJJ black belt and should be more than capable of holding his own on the ground. Thiago's 3 career defeats have come against top competition, including 2 very good wrestlers in John Fitch and Diego Sanchez, and he also lost to Martin Kampmann. Now, what I'm expecting is Thiago will be okay on the ground, should be able to hold his own, maybe even will be the better fighter, and the striking should be the difference in favor of Paul Thiago, so I have him winning this fight by decision. Up next, Kusamir Paul Harris versus Dan Miller in the middleweight division. This will be on Spike. Now, both guys are BJJ black belts and have a combined 17 career submission wins, and they've never been tapped out. But Miller has had issues with talented grapplers like Damian Maia, Chael Sonnen, and Nate Marquardt. And Kusamir should present similar challenges. Now, Paul Harris, he has serious submission skills, and he really loves to attack his opponent's legs and look for heel hooks and leg locks, etc. Now, the thing is with Dan Miller, he isn't afraid to go to the ground with anyone, but that could be his downfall in this matchup. And I have Dan Miller. He will complete a bad month of August for the Miller brothers, and I have Kusamir Paul Harris to win this fight by submission. Next, Spencer Fisher versus Thiago Tavares. Fisher looked good in a close defeat against Ross Pearson, and Thiago Tavares also looked much improved in his last bout until he got knocked out by Shane Roller. Now, Fisher, he always comes to fight, and he's only been finished twice, so he's very tough to get out of there, once by submission, once by TKO. But he has had issues with grapplers in the past, so if Thiago takes him to the mat, which he's very capable of doing, he should be in control. And Tavares showed much improved striking against Shane Roller, and he looked physically bigger, so he should be in good shape on the feet too with the striking. So I have Thiago Tavares to take Fisher down and defeat him by submission. So those are my prelim picks. Let's get to the first of the main card predictions. To kick off the main card, we're in the UFC light heavyweight division as UFC newcomer Stanislav Nedkov, 11-0, will battle 12-3 and Luis Banna Kane. Kane picked up a win via TKO in his last bout to snap a 2-fight losing streak, while undefeated Nedkov has been waiting for his debut, with fights at UFC 117 and 120 failing to materialize. Before breaking down the fighter's skill sets, there are a number of outside influences that I think will impact this fight. First, Nedkov is making his UFC debut, which has caused fighters problems in the past. Secondly, Nedkov hasn't fought in almost 15 months, so ring rust could be an issue as well. And finally, Kane is returning to his home country of Brazil, where he's a perfect 6-0. Compiling all of this together, it's advantage to Luis Kane, but I refer to them as outside influences because once the bell rings, it's all about what goes on inside the cage. Now, looking at Kane first, he's primarily a striker. He has 3 stoppage victories in the UFC, including dropping and pounding out both Thierry Sokoudjou and Elliot Marshall. Kane has very good hands, averaging over 5 strikes landed per minute, and he's incredibly effective at finishing off an opponent with ground and pound when he gets them to the mat. Nedkov has 5 stoppage victories of his own, including a win over Travis View, where Nedkov was able to get on top and beat View until the refs stopped the fight. Nedkov likes to load up his right hand, and he has power with it. Against View, he continually used a 1-2 and followed it with a clinch. When he gets in tight, he likes to use a knee to the body, which unfortunately resulted in a number of low blows against View. His grappling is serviceable. He does have a couple of submission wins, but Kane is a BJJ black belt, so should the fight hit the mat, Luis will be able to hold his own. Nedkov's striking can get quite wild, while Kane is far more technical and controlled with his approach. Kane has been stopped twice by 2 talented strikers in Little Nog and Cyril Diamante, but outside of that he has shown the ability to take punishment. The approach that Kane took against Sokoju could have similar success against Nedkov. In that matchup, Luis allowed his opponent to attack early while he covered up and avoided the majority of the strikes, resulting in Sokoju wearing himself out. When his adversary slowed down, Kane opened up and was able to earn the TKO. I could see a similar scenario here, as Nedkov has only gone beyond the first round on 3 occasions. When he did, he noticeably fatigued, and adding to this, he could suffer from the potential adrenaline dump that often happens during a fighter's debut. So I have Luis Kane to defeat Stanislav Nedkov by stoppage. In the lightweight division, 8-0 Edson Jr. Barboza will take on Ross, the real deal Pearson, 14-4. Barboza has won his first 2 UFC bouts, while Pearson rebounded with a win over Spencer Fisher to improve his octagon record to 4-1. Now both guys are primarily strikers, but each has shown that they will take the fight to the mat if the opportunity arises. The Team Roughhouse member completed 3 takedowns in his last win, and he does have 5 submission victories, but none since leaving the UK. Barboza is the BJJ purple belt, and he will mix things up with takedowns, completing 2 in his debut and 2 more against Anthony Angiakawani. Both fighters' takedown defense is respectable, and I feel that much like in their previous bouts, takedowns and groundwork will play a minor role, acting more as a supplement to their striking. Looking first at the Brit, his striking is technically sound, averaging just over 4 strikes landed per minute. He will use a 1-2 combination, mixing in a low kick to keep his opponent off balance, and he will also attack the body with both punches and leg strikes. Against Fisher, he had success with a short right hook when Fisher would close the distance and try to clinch. But also with Fisher and against Cole Miller, Pearson got off to slow starts. Now, it wasn't until later in each fight that he really began to open up and let his hands go, and unfortunately that cost him against Miller. Pearson has been in the cage with talented strikers in the past, like Andre Winner and Dennis Seaver, but there are 2 things that I believe resulted in his slow starts. Against Miller, Pearson was forced to stay on the outside, leaping in to counteract the 4-inch reach advantage of Cole, and against Fisher, I think that Spencer's speed and work rate kept Ross from getting comfortable. Now at UFC 134, Edson Barboza is going to have an even greater reach advantage at 6 inches, and his speed should create similar issues. Barboza's win over Angiakawani showcased his impressive striking skills. The Brazilian used a variety of kicks, including a wheel kick that nearly ended the fight in the final seconds. His hands are fast, and he has a powerful right that staggered his opponent twice. He also possesses some crippling leg kicks that earned him a TKO victory in his UFC debut. The biggest issue that I have with Barboza was that when his last opponent started to increase his work rate and push forward, Edson seemed to retreat back and slow down. Now, I don't expect the same issues here, as Pearson has had a tendency to put his own back towards the cage, which limits his space to move. Ross has had success doing this because he likes to counter-strike, but against Barboza's speed, reach, and manner in which he constantly mixes up his strikes, Pearson could really have difficulty landing his counter punches. Pearson should be wary of allowing someone with the power and technique of Barboza to continually land first, as he may not get the opportunity to retaliate. A slow start for the real deal could be disastrous, and if Cole Miller was able to drop Pearson, Jr. should be able to as well. So I have Edson Barboza to defeat Ross Pearson by TKO. In the heavyweight division, 9-1 Brendan the Hybrid Schaub will take on 32-6-1 Minotauro Nogueira. Schaub has won 4 in a row, including a win over Mirko Krokop in his last bout, while Big Nog is returning from an injury after almost 18 months away. Prior to that, he had dropped 2 of his last 3. Realistically, this is the 3rd straight fight for Brendan Schaub against an opponent on the downside of their career. He defeated both Gabe Gonzaga and Mirko Krokop in definitive fashion and is now faced with Big Nog as he looks to keep momentum going. Nogueira dominated Pride during the prime of his career and started off his UFC career with success, but it appears that time and the countless wars he's been through are taking their toll. The most notable change seems to be Minotauro's once vaunted chin, as he has suffered his first 2 stoppage defeats of his career in his last 3 appearances inside the octagon. On top of this, he has been suffering through a number of injuries which he took time away to heal, but all of this could simply be too much for the Brazilian to overcome. In this matchup, Big Nog is going to have an advantage on the mat. He's a BJJ black belt with 20 career submissions. He controlled the majority of the action against Randy Couture on the mat, including a couple of tight submission attempts. But in his two most recent defeats, Nog wasn't able to employ his grappling skills as the fight never went to the ground. That is what concerns me in this matchup, as Nog doesn't have the takedown skills he once had, and Brendan Schaub's physical advantages will help him to dictate where the fight goes. Brendan did take Mirko down a number of times, but if he attempts to do the same against Nog, it will give Minotauro his best chance for victory, but he does only have one submission win in his last 8 fights. If Schaub is able to avoid Nogueira's submissions, he showed some heavy ground and pound against Krokop that could stop a fight should enough of them get through. On the feet, Schaub has finished 7 of his 8 wins via knockout, and with 6 of them coming inside the first round. He has a powerful right hand, and he likes to set up this with a left jab. Minotauro's hands look good against Couture, but against Velasquez and Mir, he got the worst of the exchanges, and Schaub has shown that all it takes for him is one punch. Further, against Mirko, Schaub closed the distance and bullied Krokop along the cage using his size to control him and deliver knees in a series of powerful uppercuts. Couture had similar success with the same tactic controlling Nog in the cage, and if the undersized Randy was able to do this, I expect Brendan will be able to do the same. The size, power, and athleticism of Brendan Schaub will create all kinds of problems for Nog, and the ring rust won't help either. There are pictures floating around on the internet of Big Nog looking much bigger, but I think that this fight will serve to add Minotauro's name to the list of aging MMA stars that the fight game is passing by. Schaub will either land a big punch and score the knockout or overwhelm his adversary with a series of strikes, so I have Brendan Schaub to defeat Minotauro by stoppage. In the co-main event of the show, Mauricio Shogun Hua, 19-5, will take on 18-6 Forrest Griffin. Griffin is coming off a win over Rich Franklin, while Shogun is attempting to rebound after dropping his title against John Jones. When these two met back at UFC 76, Forrest earned a late submission victory over Hua. Prior to the end of that fight, we were treated to a combination of striking and grappling, and having rewatched the bout, I think that Forrest was on his way to his decision victory. Shogun noticeably gashed in that fight, which probably cost him both the second and third rounds after a close first stanza. Now, Hua walked away with an injured knee, Forrest got a title shot, and both fighters eventually took a turn as the divisional champ. Overall, Hua has compiled a mediocre 3-3 record inside the octagon, and in that span we have seen 2 different Shoguns. In his 2 meetings with Machida and his win over Chuck Liddell, Shogun looked very good, but in his fights with John Jones, Mark Coleman, and Griffin, he struggled tremendously. In his better showings, Hua's striking was sharp, especially his leg kicks, and he was able to finish 2 of his opponents inside the first round. In the fights that he struggled in, the Brazilian was forced to endure a far more grueling and physically demanding style of action. People like to point to the first Machida fight as the indication of the return of Shogun's endurance, but for me it's the fact that that meeting was contested almost entirely on the feet that kept Shogun from wearing out. Forrest Griffin is capable of reproducing a similar grueling matchup. He likes to use both takedowns and striking in order to mix things up. Shogun's takedown defense ranks in at 40%, which isn't great, but he is a BJJ black belt and has shown the ability to get up off the mat in past fights. That being said, John Jones showed that even a skilled grappler can be controlled from the top with the right mix of ability and physical attributes. Forrest had similar success against Rich Franklin in their fight, using his size and strength to maintain control of Franklin, and physically Shogun and the former middleweight champ are almost identical. On the feet, Shogun has 16 career knockouts, including his knockout win over Machida, who had proven almost untouchable until Hua. Forrest's striking has developed significantly since their last fight. He is far more patient, choosing to fight strategically instead of brawling. He has solid leg kicks, which helped him to earn the title against Rampage, and his hands are serviceable. He has suffered 4 knockouts, most notably against Anderson Silva and Rashad Evans, and this is a concern against a fighter like Shogun. Further, adding to the intrigue of this fight are the internet rumors regarding an apparent knee injury preventing Hua from fighting. While they have been dismissed by Shogun's trainer, I wonder if there isn't some truth to this, and if that is the case, we could see Hua's fighting ability limited. Forrest has improved since their last meeting with wins over Rampage, Tito, and Franklin. Shogun has certainly looked better than he did when he fought Forrest, but he's also looked worse. Griffin is a tough fight for anyone, and he should have confidence holding a win over his opponent already. Hua will be bolstered by his home crowd, but I think that Forrest will turn this fight into a grind and wear Shogun down again, so I have Forrest Griffin to defeat Shogun Hua in the upset and do it by decision. In the main event of the evening, the UFC middleweight title will be on the line as the champion Anderson the Spider Silva, 28-4, will take on the challenger 27-5 Yushin Thunder Okami. Okami has won 3 in a row and is 10-2 in the UFC, while Silva is undefeated in the octagon at 13-0 with 8 title defenses. Now this is a rematch from 2006 where Okami got the win via DQ when Silva hit him with a vicious upkick while Yushin's knees were down. In that matchup, Silva was aggressive and clearly the superior striker, while Okami attempted a couple of shots that fell well short. Eventually, Yushin completed a takedown, which was quickly followed by the illegal upkick. Since that meeting, I think Okami has improved significantly. The most marked change to his in-ring performance followed his one-sided defeat against Chael Sonnen. Yushin sought out Chael as a training partner, and he's gone 3-0 since. Now, you hear all the time about the addition of a fighter to a camp in order to help prepare for an upcoming bout. But the Okami-Sonnen union is different. Sonnen has had by far the most success of any fighter in the UFC against Anderson, which he should be able to build a solid game plan upon. The biggest hole in Silva's skill set appears when matched with a dominant wrestler. We saw this against both Sonnen and a little bit against Dan Henderson. Both men had success against the Spider when they used their grappling skills. Now Silva is a BJJ black belt and eventually submitted both, but not before appearing at least a little bit human. Now, it is no secret where Anderson is at his best. He has 17 career knockouts and none more impressive than his last over Vitor Belfort. His stand-up is both lethal and also unpredictable, as he will attack with limitless variations of elbows, punches, and kicks. Conversely, Okami is patient and doesn't throw a lot of strikes, landing between 25 and 40 in any given fight. Where Silva is creative and flashy, Yushin likes to keep things simple. He has a 1-2 combo, leading with a jab and falling behind with a hook, sometimes mixing in an uppercut. Against Marquardt, he took the center of the cage and had Nate backing up all fight. But Nate was able to hit him with a couple of big punches because he timed Okami as he came forward, trying to clinch behind his punches. Yushin will need to be mindful of this, as Anderson will go through a feeling out process early, looking for potential openings. Silva will have a 5.5-inch reach advantage and will be the superior striker. But as I already mentioned, Anderson has had issues with powerful grapplers, and Okami's grappling is good and should be constantly improving under Chael. Now, some feel that Silva's struggles against Sonnen were the result of an injury, but I also think that the constant pressure that Chael brought played a role. Anderson seemed far more erratic, and his strikes were less accurate because he wasn't able to set up. A lot of Anderson's past opponents, like Vitor, Forrest Griffin, and Rich Franklin, stood right in front of Silva, which allowed him to dictate the pace because he knew they were going to strike with him. Franklin had his best result when he pushed forward and took Silva down. Now, Yushin's chin has been tested before, but not like what Anderson is capable of, and if the majority of the fight is striking, there's no denying Silva will win. But Okami has been waiting too long for this opportunity to squander it by not sticking to the game plan, and I'm sure Chael has drilled this into his head. Okami will need to cut off the cage, close the distance, and bring constant pressure. He doesn't possess an explosive shot like Sonnen, but he is a judo black belt, so when he gets in close, he will be in control. Yushin will get more confident with each takedown, and should he be able to wear the champ down, I have Okami to quiet the Brazilian crowd and pull off the upset by defeating Anderson Silva by decision and become the new UFC middleweight champion. Welcome back to Kamikaze Countdown. I'm not even going to throw up the counter on this one because there's 3 things I want to talk about, and the first is UFC on Fox. Very interested to see how this deal plays out. 4 fights a year right now on Fox. The first one November 12th. It's only going to be an hour-long special. We're only going to see 2 fights, and the rest will be on the preliminaries, probably on Facebook. I'm not a huge fan of this. I want to see a minimum of 3 fights, I would think. I hope this deal works out, but at the same time, I hope it doesn't play into the oversaturation of the UFC, where it just seems like everywhere you turn there's an event on. We will see, but this should bring it to the mainstream. Let's see how it plays out. But at the same time, another thing, I've heard rumors Gus Johnson could be involved in this. Let's hope not. Secondly, Dan Hardy not being cut from the UFC after 4 straight losses. Lorenzo Fertitta stating, I like guys that war, and that's what Dan does. Yoshihiro Akiyama falling into the same category. He's lost 3 in a row and hasn't been cut. I like this sentiment. It's a good thing, folks. We don't want the UFC cutting guys with a hair trigger after 1 or 2 losses, because I really think it inhibits fighters from fighting their game because they're afraid of what could happen should they lose. They're more afraid of being cut than they are of losing, or at least being cut as a result of the loss. Secondly, I think when fighters suffer even the smallest of injuries, they think it could impact their in-cage fighting ability, they immediately pull out of a fight. And I think that's the result, again, of being cut, the result of a loss. I think the UFC should make it clear that if you go out and fight, and you put a good effort out, and you show what you're capable of, if you lose, it's going to take 3, 4, maybe Dan Hardy's case, 5 consecutive losses before you get cut. Put the effort out. We want to see exciting fights, and we will reward you for putting an effort out, maybe even without securing the W, but go out there and get the job done. And finally, pay-per-view buys. The UFC's pay-per-view buys are down significantly. Some attribute to no Brock Lesnar, different things going around. I think it has to do with the cost. First and foremost, I go to a lot of bars in search of these posters, and they say we don't show the events anymore because it's just too expensive to show it. That hurts. But for the individual, I hear one of three things. Again, it's so expensive. One of three things. The first being, okay, 10 of us got together and we all put $5 in and we ordered the show. Or, we did go to the remaining bars and we watched it there. Or finally, we streamed it online or we just caught the highlights the next day. If the UFC were to cut the price back, it's certainly going to help pay-per-view buys to go up. And the other thing is the fact that we're getting so many events now, people just can't justify committing so much cash to the events. And sometimes, as I said, goes back, injury pullouts, the fights drop off, people aren't interested in the new matchups or the lack of quality opponents we see sometimes. But the important thing is the UFC needs to, I think, would pull the price back, drop it down. Maybe if you could get 2 pay-per-views for the cost of 1 nowadays, I think that would be great. Give a discount to people who buy pay-per-views continually. If you buy UFC 134, you get, 25% off UFC 135. And then if you buy UFC 136, you get 25% off UFC 137. That's going to help people to buy because you're saying thank you for being loyal and picking up pay-per-view. And we'll see what happens. Hopefully they'll come up with something to up their pay-per-view buys and make it a little more financially viable for the fans. That's Kamikaze Countdown. Alright, so those are my predictions for UFC 134, UFC Rio. I'm sure I'm going to get some flaming because, I took Forrest Griffin to beat Shogun, and Forrest is a significant underdog, and people love Shogun, and they talk about his helicopter sweeps from the bottom and garbage like that. And Shogun may very well win the fight, but I like the odds that Forrest is paying out at. And there's just something about a fighter who won a first matchup. A lot of times they come in and do very well, even when they're not expected to in the second matchup. Same thing, I'll probably get told that putting money on anything but Anderson Silva is throwing your money away. Well, from a betting perspective, betting on Anderson Silva isn't the greatest idea in the sense that he pays so little. Yushin pays 4-1 and is very capable of pulling off the upset. So, Yushin Okami. Same thing, Big Nog. He's a significant underdog against Shab, but I just think Brendan's capable of. And there's those Pride nut huggers out there who are just going to rip on me and say, oh, Nogueira fought in Pride, therefore he will win this fight, period. Same thing with Shogun, blah, 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 blah. All right. Again, you can check me out at docsports.com. I'm going to have a full breakdown of the Anderson Silva Yushin Okami fight, including betting options and things you could bet on to make a little bit of money. Thank you for watching my show, UFC 134. The next one will be the Strikeforce September 10th event, Karatanov versus Barnett. Please feel free to comment on everything, and I hope, I will try to respond as best as possible. I haven't done a post show in a while. That will be coming up probably after this event because I have a lot to talk about. I'm out of here. Good luck this weekend. UFC 134, Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions. See you later.